Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Google Hangout for Fire Engineering for September 27th. I'm P.J Norwood, and today with me I have Chief Avillo from New Jersey, and he has a whole host of titles and places he's been and things he's done, and we'll let him tell you all those great travels that he's done and what he's done for the fire service. My partner in crime, Frank Ricci, today is not able to make it, so I'm running solo. We also have Anthony Carrera, also from New Jersey, who you may see a Facebook photo of him down the bottom of your screen today, but he's having some connection difficulties. So he's going to come back in maybe 20 minutes or so and hopefully be able to log in. So today we're going to be talking about our standard health and safety topics and trying to take it a little bit further and really tap into Chief Avillo's expertise, especially when we talk about safety. We're going to talk a little bit about some line of duty deaths and where we are as far as little over the 6 month point of the year, and get some of Chief Avillo's insight to that. But before we get started, we always have to thank Fire Engineering for this opportunity and Chief Hall for giving us this platform each and every month. But even a little bit deeper than that, we need to thank Takata Fabric. Takata Fabric is a sponsor of this show each and every month, and Takata Fabric began in 1969 by supplying the fire service with inherently fire-resistive fabric for our turnout gear. In fact, 7 out of 10 of us wear turnout gear that has been manufactured with Takata fabric. So basically, they take the fabrics, they put it out to the manufacturers, who then build our turnout gear. So whether you're wearing, Globe, Innotex, Morning Pride, one of the many manufacturers, you're probably wearing fabric from Takata. So we thank them for giving us this opportunity to continue to support this show each and every month, but also for their support of the fire service in making these inherently fire-resistant products that are not added, do not have any chemicals added to it. So we're not increasing our exposure to any nasty stuff by wearing their naturally inherent fire-resistive products. So we appreciate their support. So Chief Avillo, thanks for joining us from New Jersey. I know things are good. You've been retired, retired, I guess you could say, from the from the actual firehouse for a little bit now. So how's that going?
It's good. You know what? You miss the guys, but it's interesting because the guys that I really liked, I see anyway. I miss the fires. I miss the response. I guess when you sort of have that little bit of adrenaline junkie in you. And that's not always the best thing for a firefighter, to be adrenaline driven, but yeah, everybody knows that sort of feeling when when the alarm hits, and I definitely miss that. But it's good. You come out on the other side, it's good. It's always good. I come out relatively unscathed, externally anyway. Not sure what's working on the inside yet, but try and get my checkups all the time. I'm currently the director of the Monmouth County Fire Academy, which has is a great sort of reawakening for me. Something similar to when we did the Command Perspectives DVDs. That was a reawakening. You guys sort of reinvigorated me, you and Pep and Duffy and my grandbrother and Richie, my stepson, who's grounded right now, by the way. Yeah, you guys reinvigorated me, and Academy has sort of done the same thing for me. Every now and then you got to be able to sort of refresh your batteries, and sometimes you have to go someplace else to do that, and it's worked out pretty good for me.
Yeah, well, you've done a lot of great things for the fire service, and you recently launched your 2nd edition. Is that correct? No, the whole new book, right?
Well, Strategies is the 3rd edition. That came out in November. There's a workbook that came out with that. So there's 3 workbooks that are all completely different, but they're all based on the book. And then the new book that just came out about a month ago, and I selflessly will plug it, Full Contact Leadership. There it is right there. It's Chief Ed Flood on the cover. He was my mentor. He is my mentor. And I'm just really excited about it and really fortunate that he was able to put to paper his great expertise and insights on leadership in the fire service, because I've seen a lot of people. I know a lot of people. There are some great people that have great information on leadership. Nobody approaches Flood. It's just my opinion, but nobody gets it like he does. And hopefully this year, the people going to the FDIC will benefit from his teachings, as I have for the last 32 years.
And I'm sure they will. And I know we have a 4-hour workshop this year at USD. I know Chief Flood, does he have a workshop or does he have a classroom this year?
No, it's a classroom session, full contact leadership. Still flushing out all the information that he's going to use in it. I'm probably going to be there in the class. I'll let him run with it, but sometimes I got to like sort of guide him back from Pluto, because sometimes he goes a little too far into some outer stratosphere direction, and you know, that's why I felt this book came really good. It's sort of the best of me on Earth and him up in the stratosphere somewhere, and it kind of melded very well together, I think.
That's some good stuff. I still unfortunately admit, but I still haven't purchased a copy of mine. So I think it's about time. We said a friend of mine promoted to lieutenant, so I think I'm going to order 2 of them this week and get that under my belt, because I know the good stuff that you've done. So I'd love to read what you've put into it and also learn a little bit more about Chief Flood. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I sent you a couple of excerpts from it, didn't I?
You did. I actually saw some excerpts and sat next to you in Nebraska while you were finishing up a couple chapters. And
yeah. Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So it was sort of a you know, books have a lifespan. You know, there's that whole gestation period of getting it off the ground, and once it's published, it's a great feeling. Great feeling.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks, bro.
So Chief, last 2 months ago, I believe it was, we had Bill Carey on. Bill Carey, who we all know works for Penwell. He's one of those guys behind the scenes, runs Fire Nation, and does a lot with information gathering and posting and sharing information. He's doing some amazing things with the line of duty death reports, not just looking at the numbers, actually really diving into the meat and potatoes, I like to call, of the line of duty deaths, and see how we're truly dying, and how firefighters are truly losing their life, you know, across the country. And he has a little hashtag data, not drama, because there's no drama, which we know exists so much in the fire service, primarily because of social media. And has really dove into the meat and potatoes of the line of duty deaths. So I have some numbers here, and we brought him on to kind of go over this a little bit for us and chat about the line of duty deaths and how he views the data. We got some great information from him. And there's some information in here that, you know what, you hear line of duty deaths, and we just assume that, you know, firefighters are getting killed in the fire grounds. We assume that firefighters are getting killed during, you know, because of fire behavior and rooftop ventilation and collapse. But for the first half of the year, so by the end of August for 2017, we've had 66 line of duty deaths, and the same time frame last year we had 57. But out of those 66 that we've had for 2017, none of them were related to fire behavior, none of them were related to ventilation or collapse, and none of them took place in abandoned buildings.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting, and that's where he says it's data, it's not drama. You know, so we focus, and I know you focus, countless hours of training and education of our firefighters in ventilation and hose line management, and search, and, you know, vacant or abandoned building tactics, techniques.
Yeah. So recognizing signs of rapid fire progression, you know, and development.
Yeah, so I think all the work that everybody's been doing for many, many, many years, longer than I've been doing any of this, is working based on the numbers. But where we're falling short, this isn't a surprise to a lot of people, is cardiovascular death, cancer, and then also the elephant in the room of suicide. You know, we really don't have a good grasp of the suicide, because we really don't have any good numbers to actually quantify, you know, current firefighters and retired firefighters on suicide, or whether it's truly job related or not. So when we originally were thinking about this show, Frank Ricci and I said, well, let's look at this from a different perspective, and let's bring some people in like yourself and Anthony Carey, hopefully will be joining us in the 15 or 20 minutes, and try to tap you for some of your experience, some of your knowledge, some of your thoughts, because a lot of it's kind of theory. You know, we can teach somebody to have good hose line advancement. We can teach somebody to recognize rapid fire development. We can teach somebody to identify the signs of ventilation-induced fire behavior and when to hold off on that ventilation until there's water in place. Right. And we have something tangible. But when we start talking about cardiovascular death, we start talking about cancer, and we start talking about suicide, it's, unless you know, or you were, you know, partners with somebody in a firehouse who committed suicide, or passed away from cancer. You had somebody truly you cared and loved about that was contracted with cancer that you believe is job related. It's sometimes hard for us to really grasp how those issues or those diseases, those things are killing firefighters. So that's kind of where we're going to have a roundtable discussion on that today. It's kind of a small square table right now between you and I.
Table for two.
Table for two. So what are your thoughts? You've been doing this a long time. You started as a 5-year-old boy, because I know you're not that old. So you've been doing this a long time. So what are your thoughts surrounding the line of duty deaths and the cardiovascular, the cancer and the suicide, and kind of packaging that? And okay, we understand that it exists, but how do we actually get the ground level troops, the firefighters riding backwards today, to understand that this is a reality, and then to try to take steps to impact it?
Well, it's a really interesting data that you're giving out there, and I mean, for no one really to be killed doing like firefighter one type activities in those 66 line of duty deaths, that's pretty sort of staggering. I mean, I imagine there's some MVAs in there and that thing, but when you talk about the cardiovascular, cancer, and the suicide, I always kind of look at it from an incident commander's point of view. And as an incident commander, when I'm on the fire ground, I can look at things and I can sort of try to prevent people from getting themselves jammed up in some of these other areas. But these areas you're talking about for cardiovascular, cancer, suicide, these are sort of like unseen, hidden type areas that you can only address them a little bit on your fire ground. Like for instance with cancer and with cancer, it's an issue of, for some is, ensure your gear is on properly, ensure your mask is on all the time, mandatory mask rules enforced, ensure your gear is washed all the time. Cardiovascular is rotation and relief, and, suicide would be, recognizing PTSD and bringing in CIS people. But all those things are sort of reactive when you get to the fire ground. They all need to be kind of addressed from almost like day one, I mean, if you look at it, what's the best way to prevent us from ingesting or absorbing, methyl ethyl bad stuff? And that's, wash your hands when you're done. You learn that when you were, before you were old enough to even talk, because your parents are continuously washing your hands, So it's almost like I think we're starting to transition to it. I think the awareness now that you're putting out here right now, and that is sort of going around in the fire service, is starting to move us in a direction of off the fire ground prevention in these areas. It's got to be a part of a comprehensive program. These are, again, where you talk about, if the department does not show that these things are important, it's hard for the firefighters and rank and file to really embrace them. It almost becomes a personal thing, But then again, you look at, these are silent killers, have you ever heard of the gift from Captain Buscio?
No, sir.
The gift from Captain Buscio was a captain from Jersey City that was 31 years old. He was a runner. He was in outstanding shape, and he passed away from a heart attack at 31 years old. And his wife started this thing in New Jersey called the Gift from Captain Buscio. And you can go to 3 different locations and get a totally complete physical for yourself and your next of kin for free. Or if your insurance doesn't cover it all, it's all free. And it's a really good thing. And a lot of people take advantage of it. A lot of people don't, of course. But I think one of the biggest things, and I'm teaching a lot of firefighter one guys now, they get a physical saying they're okay for fire one, and this is just a doctor that doesn't know the business, doesn't know anything about it. He's telling them to cough from across the room, and and then he signs off saying they're good for firefighter one. And then you look at the guy, and he's got asthma we don't know about. He tells us, and that's not on his doctor report. I think what departments need to do is, and maybe this needs to go through other formal channels, is create a baseline for every guy, and ensure that on a yearly basis they're being checked and monitored, so that when that baseline starts to sort of make its way into a weird area, you can take preventive action. unfortunately, in career departments, the unions don't always like that, because then, if a guy is flagged as being, sort of not fit for the job, where years ago when that wasn't in place, what do you do with that guy? Do you fire him? Do you put him on light duty? Some departments don't. It's a very sort of complex issue. But that having been said, with the fire department end of it and the legal end of it, the responsibility also has to lie with the individual. This is not a job where you can sit back on your butt and in your downtime and do nothing. This is a job where you have to take steps to keep yourself safe, and that's got to start with the newer guys. For guys like me, listen, I remember putting my hands in my turnout gear and my fingernails coming out dirty. So we never really had that mentality. It was all the salty mentality. The dirtier the gear was, the more edge of courage you had. But that mentality has to leave us.
And I want to hit a couple points that you made. I'll start with the last one. That salty mentality of the dirtier gear is, the better firefighter you are. I think that has really changed. I think that mentality has changed because of Firefighter One programs like yourself and the great work that the Firefighter Cancer Network has done, at least locally. And I have a small view. I don't have a big national view of that, but I think locally that has definitely impacted, and I think we're definitely better across the board. You're always going to have those pockets of individuals or places that are going to be different, but I think overall we're doing really well there. You mentioned the career departments and union departments. That's absolutely a huge issue. But what also is big is the volunteer departments. Recruitment and retention in our volunteer ranks are very, very challenging. I work in a combination department, and we're just not getting the volunteer turnout any longer that we've had it in the past. So now you have, maybe you have 50% of the volunteers you had 20 years ago, and now you're going to tell 25% or 30% of them that they're not healthy enough to come to your fires.
Right.
Should they be told they should come to the fires? Yes, absolutely. But now the chiefs and the mayors and the first selectmen, that's a really hot political football that they have to handle it on their end, because now you're going to tell somebody that they can't volunteer, that they can't give back to your community. I kind of challenge that a different way with my volunteers, because I have some really good volunteers who just can't be in burning buildings. But there's plenty for them to do. So when I became the training officer in the department, I separated our volunteers into two categories: interior and non-interior. And I told these non-interior firefighters, say, look, there's a lot that I need done on the exterior of this building. So I want to make sure that we focus all your training, all your education on doing those things good. And then taking the group of interior firefighters, say, look, we want you inside the building because we need your help, but we're going to make sure that you're proficient. And we're going to put these mechanisms in place to make sure that you're proficient, so you're safe for yourself, safe for the community, and you don't create more of a hazard in the fire grounds. That's very challenging in combination departments, but we could, and I hate to say we could afford, but we have the career staff to work with them. Right. And all volunteer departments, that's a huge problem. If you're looking at 20, 30% decrease in the volunteer staff, and now you're going to take another 20% off of that because of physicals and not being fit. Well, you know what? That's what needs to happen. But who is then going to respond? Who's going?
That's the problem. That's where you have to. Now you're branching out into automatic aid and potentially looking at career positions. That's happening a lot in Monmouth County now. They're looking at career positions because they're just not getting the volunteers to come out during the day. But the other end of it, and we see this in Firefighter One, is we'll get people that they're not in shape, they don't have strength, their wind is and they become a liability. And what happens after 3 or 4 weeks, they say, man, I didn't think this was going to be that hard. So we can't dial it down for them, but we also have to sometimes have a talk with them and say, look, you got to realize that maybe this isn't for you. It's a hard thing to do, because these departments, they're not. Sometimes you get departments looking to flush guys out, for them. When they come to the academy, look, we know this guy never made it, but we don't want to say nothing, so let the academy tell him. But but there's a lot of personal responsibility in this way, and I heard Mike Dugan say something which I thought was great. He was talking about getting checkups. He was talking about keeping yourself in shape, eating good food and all that. And he said, what you got to remember is you want to be able to walk your daughter down the aisle when she gets married. And, you know, I kind of took that to heart. I have 2 daughters, and, you know, trying to, you know, take care of myself a little better now. And we use a Class A burn building, and, you know, so, you know, Class A is like, you know, it's no big deal. You can, you know, you can breathe a little bit of it, you know, but, you know, I've been trying not to like stick my face in that door if I don't got a mask on, you know, and I really push the mandatory mask rules and things like that at the academy, because, you know, something can happen now that, you know, and that's what we tell them, you know, they're silent killers. You may ingest something now, put your hands in your mouth, 10 years from now, you're developing, you know, stomach cancer or esophageal cancer or something along those lines. But you know, listen, the job is never going to be that. It's never going to be a prophylactic type of job where you don't have all that stuff. But I think the key is for people to look to take care of themselves and get themselves checked as much as possible. And departments have that responsibility to get those guys checked. You know, we were talking about the gear issues. You know, how do you, you know, a lot of departments don't have 2 sets of gear. I imagine, is that an NFPA standard? 2 sets of gear or a recommendation? I'm not even sure if it's a recommendation.
I would assume it's probably a recommendation. I don't, but I don't know.
Yeah, same with the hood, you know, two hoods, you know, but that's an important piece. You know, you got to be washing your gear. And again, going back to the cardiovascular issues, you know, again, it's a silent killer. You don't know. You know, I had, when I was acting chief in North Hudson, one of the things I wanted to do, and I wasn't able to do it, was take out companies, 1 company from each battalion off duty for an hour each day so they can exercise, work out. If there's a working fire, you know, or something that, you know, they come right back on duty. But, you know, like they wouldn't be going to alarm activations or water leaks or things like that, but they would have that hour to work out. Every firehouse has a gym. You know, the other thing is we could have a central gym, and you bring them down there. They get their workout in, they're off duty for an hour, and then they go back to work. You know, sometimes the department needs to, you know, look to actively engage their people in things that are good for them. You know?
I agree. And, you know, we spoke earlier today, and we're talking about the, you know, the decon and getting to the reduction of cancer. You know, some of the things that we've done here, you know, we've done well on the surface, but if you really look at it, it's not really good enough. You know, we have a hood exchange program. So everybody has, well, the battalion commanders, we run 1 battalion chief that runs the whole town or the whole city. And there is a cachet of clean hoods in his or her vehicle, in the battalion aid vehicle. So after fire, in theory, you go get a clean hood, hand in your gloves and your hood, you get a new set of gloves, you get a new hood. Yours are taken back, they're washed, and then they're back redistributed to you when, you know, at a later time and gear, we don't have a second set of turnout gear. You know, financially, that's just not in the cards for us. You know, we have a new chief now, going on 4 months, even the chief of the department. And of course, that's something he would probably like to get to, but that's just not in the cards for him either right now. You know, he has, I don't want to say bigger things that he has to fight for, but there's bigger things that he has to fight for right now.
Sure.
You know, so we put decon equipment on all of our engine companies. We put a 5-gallon bucket with a 2.5 down to a 3/4 inch reducer for a garden hose, put a garden hose in the bucket, some fire wipes. You know, so we're trying to get the pump operator when, you know, the brothers and sisters come out of the building, take garden hose out, and you know, try to do some gross decon.
Great idea.
That's great in theory, and when it's implemented, it works. But now you're soaking the only set of turnout gear that firefighter has. So, you know, well, we have brushes in there, so let's try to brush it off. So there's things that we're trying to do, and in theory, they're great. But for smaller departments like myself, it's not really. It just doesn't work, and I'm sure in the larger departments, it's even more challenging.
Are your guys on duty? Like, what is the schedule there? Like, would they be able to wash their stuff while they're not on duty?
They could. They do a 3-on, 3-off schedule, so they're 3 10-hour days, 3 days off, 14-hour nights. But thankfully, we currently have 1 firefighter in our ranks. He's been on the job greater than 25 years now. In the last couple of years, he's taken on this unofficial role of managing all of our turnout gear. And he goes around and he works a ton of overtime. He lives in town, so he's always around. And he'll stop in and go, "Hey, PJ, your gear's a little bit dirty. I have another set for you," because he knows all of our sizes. He said, "I already have a set put aside for you, so I need to exchange that out. We need to get that washed." You know, if he's not on top of it, that's spread throughout the department a little bit. That message is kind of spread, but not 100%. You know, there's days I got called out yesterday training. One of the we're doing some search and rescue training yesterday. One of the guys pointing at my pants goes, "Hey, PG, your gear looks a little bit dirty there." Like, yeah, Freddie, you know what? You're right. You know, and that was kind of made me proud at that moment that he was calling me out on it. You know, because that's not something that we should. Oh, you know, he's a deputy chief of training. We shouldn't say anything because I'm a private. No, if you're a private and you see somebody, there's obviously the right way to do it. And as long as you're doing it the right way, he's taking care of me, which in turn is taking care of my family. So I thank them for it, and my gear's getting sent out to get washed today. You know, so luckily that message has changed within our department, but I know that's not clear across the board. You know, the Cancer Network, I think, is doing a great job in resources and training and education. University of Illinois has been doing some really good work with UL and studying our environment to learn how we're actually exposed. You know, and I think that's where the wipes come into play, whether you use baby wipes or whether you purchase a manufactured wipe that's specific to the firefighters that are usually a little bit bigger, like we use fire wipes. You know, there's plenty of departments that use baby wipes too. Right. You know, but there's some debate out there, and I don't know what all the answers are, whether the baby wipes have, you know, certain chemicals in them and higher alcohol content. And you know what, but you need to be using something. We found that fire wipes. Okay for babies. Yeah, exactly. But, you know, we found that fire wipes, we found because they're bigger. They're not, you know, small for a baby's backside. Okay. They're bigger for us, you know, so those work.
I was just thinking you put the name fire wipes on it and they could charge you 3 times as much money.
Yeah. You know, I don't know the cost of that manufacturers. We were using a different one, but they came in a package similar to baby wipes, you know, a multi-use container. So after the first 25% was gone, the rest of them just dried out because, you know, what do firefighters do? Shove it back in the compartment. So these are individually packaged. They're firefighter proof, you know. But there's a lot of different things that you could do. But a lot of that, again, you already said it, comes back to that personal accountability. You know, it takes me taking some personal accountability and getting into the gym, whether my boss is giving me the time per day to do it or not, to get my butt out of bed early in the morning or after work, doing something physically for me to keep myself fit, you know, and not always saying, well, you know, the damn chief's not giving me the time to do it on duty. You know, the damn chief is not giving me a second set of turnout gear. Well, did you change your hood? Did you change your gloves? Did you wash your gear on your days off? You know, so there's definitely a huge personal accountability piece in there that you absolutely hit on. You know, and maybe you address this in your book in Full Contact Leadership. I'm not sure, but we're going to take a quick break, thank our sponsor, and maybe you can help us on the leadership piece there. You know, how do we instill that personal accountability on our recruits coming in? So we really don't have to take a break, but at the halfway point of the show, we always like to, again, throw out and remind everybody that may be listening today live, utilize the hashtag FETalk through Twitter. So FETalk on Twitter, so you can, you know, pose your questions, your suggestions, your thoughts, your comments for myself and Chief Avillo. And if you ask us a question, we'll absolutely, you know, ask Chief Avillo that, see if we come up with an answer. But also, we want to thank again Takata Fabrics for giving this opportunity and sponsoring this show each and every month. You know, and what I like about Takata Fabrics are they have that inherently fire-resistant fabrics. So they're not taking their fabric and impregnating it with all sorts of chemicals that are going to increase our exposure to toxic chemicals. So Takata, thank you for what you do for the fire service and for us. So
I can't believe a half hour has gone by already.
It's amazing. So we also, it looks like we have Anthony maybe online here. Let's see. So Anthony Carrera, who was supposed to join us at the beginning, was having some connection problems. But it doesn't look, I don't see him, so I'm not getting him onto the screen. Anthony, can you hear us? Anthony?
Says he's on a hotline in a firehouse.
Yeah. Anthony, if you can hear us, try turning your camera on. So Chief Avillo, the other thing before we get too far, because I'm going to forget to mention if we don't now, one other threat to the current fire service is on the EMS side. You know, we have the whole host of communicable diseases and things that we deal with, but not just here in Connecticut, but I know it's a national problem right now, is the opiate overdoses. And I just wanted to take a quick second to remind, all the brothers and sisters that are responding, today and tomorrow, the weeks ahead that may see this, is make sure you treat all these heroin overdoses or potentially opiate overdoses that they contain fentanyl. We have first responders across the country and police officers across the country that, while responding and taking care of somebody, are being absorbing this fentanyl, and they're going into a respiratory arrest or respiratory distress from the fentanyl, and they don't even realize that they're being exposed because such a small amount of fentanyl could impact us. So try to, they're lacing lacing a lot of the opiates with fentanyl, and it's absorbed through your skin, and small microns you could absorb through your skin and put you into respiratory arrest. So one, make sure you're wearing something we've never had to worry about before in these calls, is an N95 mask or some sort of respiratory protection so you don't inhale it. But also on these calls, look around and pay attention to your brothers and sisters. If one of them's not acting properly, starts to be a little disorientated, a little bit confused, or seems to be overly sweaty and it's 60 degrees out, and then starts having some trouble breathing, get some Narcan on board because they've probably been exposed to fentanyl. So in that whole health and safety mindset today, take care, watch out for yourselves, watch out for your brothers and sisters, and have this in the back of your head that we could be having fentanyl overdoses to our brothers and sisters on EMS calls, but we have to catch it early, so please pay attention. So I see Anthony's still trying to log in here, but he's having some trouble. So let's move on until we see if he gets on here, Chief. So full contact leadership. Today we're talking about line of duty deaths, but not the advancing hose lines, ventilation and collapse and rapid fire development. We're talking about this, what we didn't really talk about yet, but the suicide. Talk about suicide and cancers and cardiovascular deaths. Where does the leadership piece come in, and how do you instill? So if I have 3 recruits right now in the recruit fire school, when they come out of the state fire school, they come to me for a week. I do some on-shift orientation with them Monday through Friday for a week. During that week, how do I instill a personal accountability in them, or do they have to have that as a child coming into the door?
Well, I think discipline on their part is a great thing to bring into the game. But you know what it really starts with, bro, is it starts with the department needs to have policy. Policy is really what gives the department its teeth. The policy runs up and down the chain of command, sideways through the chain of command, and it puts everybody on the same page. So if you have accountability policies, if you have policies in regard to personal protective equipment, if you have these things have to be ingrained into these people day one. It has to be, if it's important to the chief of department, it will be important to everyone else, all the way down the chain of command. So I think the biggest thing you need to do with a probation, Flood just actually did an article for the FDIC, and it's called Command Presence. And it's basically has nothing to do with the fire ground. It's basically about how you comport yourself, and it has to do with a firefighter. It's sort of a little mini story, sort of like the Grace Powers things that we have in the book, where a firefighter was detailed to another company, and the company treated him as if he was not just detailed, but he was one of them. And they had this entire plan in place for his indoctrination and training into the company. All the expectations were set. And that's what it's about. It's setting expectations, but it's also about, and this is something that I just got from Flood now, because he always comes up with something else, boundaries. What boundaries does a department set? Expectations are great, but you also have to set the boundaries so that people understand on the outside of that boundary is unacceptable behavior. And those boundaries have to be stated and they have to be understood. So when we're talking about, mandatory mask rules, we're talking about, keeping people sort of safe from themselves a little bit. When we're talking baseline physicals and things like that, these almost have to be departmental mechanisms. And if you look at some of the departments that are a little more progressive than us in the East Coast out west and things like that, there are mechanisms there, like Phoenix and places like that have these mechanisms in place, and you need a buy-in. Has to be a buy-in, and the buy-in you would hope is going to be voluntary. And I don't mean voluntary meaning that they'll do it if they want. But the buy-in you're hoping is that people are motivated to buy in because they because they buy in, not because the department's saying you've got to do this. Buy in because they buy in, because there are reasons behind why the department is doing these things. Now, if a captain can't explain that to a guy below him, then the people above him have to explain that to the captain. You know, so that leadership aspect is you know, it's an up and down the chain of command, all encompassing, all ranks, all the time, 24/7. That's full contact leadership. You know, that's what makes a department roll. And then again, when those boundaries are set, people operating outside the boundaries have to be flagged every single time. That the expectations have to be that you operate outside those boundaries, there are going to be some sort of consequences. And the consequences don't have to be always bad, but, you know, remedial training, things like that, you know. That, I think everything that happens on a department, if it's not happening from the top down, then it's never going to gain a lot of traction. You know, sometimes you get great companies, but you have lousy companies. And the reason, because the department is not enforcing, you know, and you see it all the time. One company is always wearing their gear, always got the gear on. Another company or another mutual aid company in, you're seeing these guys that come and their coats are open, nobody's got packs on. You know, again, these are mechanisms and expectations that departments have to set. Because if you're not setting them and they're not in place, then how do people know how they're supposed to act and how they're supposed to behave? Departments are setting codes of behavior. And if they're not, then they have to expect that they're going to be sort of mending fences or fixing problems almost at every turn, you know?
You know, and I like the word expectations. No, that does. That's good. And I like the word expectations. Like I mentioned, that, you know, we have a new chief. Chief comes to us from Frank's old department, you know, Frank Ricci's department, New Haven. He's been the chief of the department for 4 months now. And it's the first time in 7 years in doing my job, I was told what the chief expects of me every day.
Yeah.
And it was quite simple. He says, you're the training officer. I expect you to be training. We have contractual hours that limit when I could be training. But he says, the labor agreement indicates when you should be training. I want you training the men and women of the department during those hours every day.
Now here's a question. Is that all that what he just told us written down?
Not to me at this point, but I'm sure he's a very good chief. He's doing a very good job, and he's very good with the documentation. And you know, our SOGs were written in '92, updated 2000. He's working on that as a committee and making great progress on paper, also not just in the operations. So
absolutely.
If it's not yet, it will be, because it's still so early in his career.
Well, the point I'm going to make here is P.J. Norwood is not only always going to be a training officer there, but the things that you've put in place and the things that the department has allowed you to do, whatever, that should become a living document of training officer roles and responsibilities, so that the next guy that takes your place, he just has to look at that. And these are the boundaries and expectations of that job. Like in North Hudson, we don't have them for training officer. We have them for safety officer, accountability officer. We have them for all those things because, you know, we know that while this guy might be doing a great job, he's not going to be the last guy to do that job. Somebody's going to take his place. So what we're looking to do is set up some sort of mechanism by which this guy will behave and operate, you know, and you know, that I mean, and all the things you're doing there are great. And then, you know, again, like that next step is like, well, who better to write that than you and the chief, and say, look, this is what the sort of ideal training officer for the East Haven Fire Department will be, you know? You know, again, expectations and boundaries.
Yeah,
you know, that protects you.
And you can relate that right to the overbearing topic of today of reducing line of duty deaths. And you know, if there's expectations written for me as the training officer, there should be expectations of what I'm training the members in. I know, you know, one thing you're a big advocate on, I'm a big advocate on, is something as simple as chin straps, right? But if that's not written, if I'm not training the guys in the department's expectations, how are they supposed to know? You know, so how are they supposed to know? Yeah, should they know? Of course they should know. Should they get that in recruit school? Of course they should get that in recruit school. But you know what? They may see an article or a video, or they may see somebody, you know, without their chin strap on and say, oh, that's cool. I'm not going to wear my chin strap. And they don't know that that's an expectation of the department. So those have to be communicated also. And I think that's where, and I'm not going to say we as a mighty department, but we overall, we fail in that communication piece, you know, making sure that everyone knows from the top down what those expectations are.
Well, the greatest illusion in the fire service and the greatest illusion in communication is that it is actually taking place, you know? And again, when you talk about communication, we're not just talking about telling somebody something. We're talking about having a written policy. Like in North Hudson, there is a written policy that says you will wear that chin strap. You will, when you get off the apparatus, that hood will be around your neck, ready to don. You will have full protective equipment on all the time. Chief officers on all fire grounds will have full protective equipment on. I mean, this is all written down because it's an expectation and it sets the boundaries. And if what it does is protect you, it protects the operator who understands that this is what needs to be done. It also protects the department. Because someone can say, well, he's not wearing his chin strap. Yeah, well, then they are operating contrary to the rules and regulations of this fire department. You know, so you know, again, we have a lot of stuff written down because we've learned a lot of lessons over the years from different things. So it's almost like, and it's a lot of work for chief officers and people like yourself. You see something that needs to be done and you see it a couple of times, and some guys are good at it, some guys comply with it, some guys don't. And the reason they don't is because there's no boundaries and expectations, and nothing was ever really written down. It becomes a departmental rule, you know, rule, a regulation, that sort of thing. You know, those are the game plans by which departments operate and run themselves and police themselves. For lack of a better term, we police ourselves, even though we're a fire department.
And those small things is what drives the line of duty numbers down across the country. You know,
Sure.
if we're not paying attention to the details, the small things each and every day, we can't take care of the big things. You know, if I can't get the men and women in my department to wear their chin strap or keep their mask on until the environment gets metered, I can't get them to get to the gym and work out. I can't get them to do the bigger things. I can't get them to go to their physical, you know. So it starts with that small, I say simple stuff. You know, if you can't manage those things to help contribute positively to decreasing line of duty deaths, you're going to miss all the big stuff. You're not going to be able to get them to wear seatbelts if you can't get them to wear a chin strap. If you can't get them to wear seatbelts, you're not going to be able to get them to drive safely on the farm.
There's personal commitments, there's company officer responsibilities, there's departmental expectations. Like I said, it runs up and down a chain of command. And when you have that failure in the chain of command, wherever that kink is, it has to be identified and it has to be known to be rectified, you know, immediately. And if policies have to be rewritten or written because of that, well, so be it. That's what needs to be done, you know. How many departments, and this really staggers my imagination, electrical safety. We have an electrical safety policy in North Hudson. It's a one-page electrical safety policy. It's basically what it is. But it's there, it's trained on, we do additional training with it. But I couldn't believe how many departments do not have an electrical safety policy that they train on. Well, then how can you expect your people to operate safely around electricity? I mean, you can't always rely on common sense, because common sense has shown us it's not the best sense to have all the time. So you have to rely on departmental policy. And again, that policy, you know, dovetails into the training division that you're in, you know, and it just boggles my mind that departments don't have policy. It's something as simple as driver policy and backing up policy. You know, a backing up policy will state where guys are supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there, how they're supposed to operate, what they're supposed to have. All that's in place. You know why? So there's no so really there's no wiggle room. Because when you're writing policy, it's nice to have some wiggle room, but some policy doesn't require wiggle, you know, because then it gives a choice. You know, if a guy don't feel like grabbing a hand light at night while back in the rig and he gets hit by a car, well, because the department, well, it's a choice. No, it's not a choice. You know, take a light with you so you don't get hit. You know, so I don't know. There's, you know, there's a lot of the stuff I'm talking about is in this book. And it really, really falls under the responsibility of the chief of department and how he disseminates and brings along the people underneath him. And again, up the chain, down the chain, across the chain, the whole thing.
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, because we talked about setting expectations, but getting people to have that personal accountability. You know, and you could add me to this. You know, years ago, I wasn't smart in the fire ground. You know, I'd take my mask off too early. I would take those chances.
Sure.
Like I still will if needed, but I'm a little smarter about it. and it didn't really hit me until it caught up with me, and I got hurt in the fire ground. And I sat back and realized, you mentioned your daughter, and I remember I fell through a floor and tore my knee up, and I remember coming home and my daughter not wanting me to go back to work because she didn't want me to get hurt again. And that's actually my chapter in Pass It On Too, in Billy Goldfeder's book, Pass It On Too, of that day. And my daughter telling me that, I was like, putting a knife right in my heart, and that's when it took something like that for the fire ground to catch up to me, for me to get hurt, to say, you know what, this could have been worse. I could have got hurt. I'm not invincible, and I could have got killed, and I would not have walked my daughter down the aisle. So what do I want to do? What do I want to do in life? Do I want to keep taking those chances, or I want to take those chances in a little smarter way? Because, like you mentioned, never forget, you can't wrap us in bubble wrap on the fire grounds. There's some way. I know that's
something like that. Prophylactic.
Yeah, prophylactic, wrap us all in bubble wrap. If we could, that would be great. But the fire ground is inherently dangerous. Exposing us to toxins, giving us the mental baggage, and maybe not PTSD, but in fact impacting us psychologically, that could lead to suicide in some of our brothers and sisters. The toxins that we're affected or exposed to affects our cardiovascular system. There's some of that we can reduce. Yeah. Right. So we need to figure out how we can reduce it, but it also cannot or should not impact us from doing the job that we're here to do also. And that's a tough line.
What's interesting, one of the things you mentioned was, you're thinking about, wow, I'll take my mask, but now it's in your mindset. We're slowly putting this sort of personal health responsibility, and slowly that's working our way into our mindset. It's at the fire academies. I mean, not everybody, because I see people that, one, they're not involved in a department that trains all the time, and they are just absolutely clueless to the 21st century fire service. But you could see where even the UL stuff, you could see where this is creeping now into the business, and people are much more aware of it now than they were 10 years ago, and it's a good thing. That's a good thing. And, you get this sort of ripple start to flow in the water, and then, I think, we're moving in the right direction. There are things that sort of drop us, down the wrong path from time to time, but I feel as a service, we are definitely moving more in the right direction in regards to some of these things than we ever have before,
I agree. I think we are moving, and I think a lot of it is the double-edged sword of social media.
Yeah, my daughter just walked in.
So, social media, which creates problems within the fire service, because it's hard to understand somebody's true meaning sometimes behind posts and comments and likes or unlikes and all that nonsense. But yet without it, I don't think we would be where we are. We receive information now so quickly, and an enormous amount of information through social media. We just have to figure out each individually how to filter it properly and not get caught up in the like Carey, data not drama, or drama not data. However,
the pond has gotten a lot wider than it is deep, so you got to be a little careful with sometimes there's false gods out there, and again, the empty can rattles the most, but people have to, how you figured it out? You read, you study, you understand all this stuff, so that when you look at stuff that's sort of, hey, I never heard of this guy before, he's throwing something out there, you got to kind of really take a look at it, you really do. But but again, we also sometimes have to protect people from themselves with our policies, the mandatory mask rule. And, one of the things that comes to mind is smoking. Like guys that smoke, there are departments that don't allow people to smoke because they're paying the guy's insurance. Smoking on the apparatus, smoking at the fire academy, all those things, those are areas where, it's funny because you talk until you're blue in the face for the last 30 years on how bad smoking is, and we're only just now starting to scratch the surface of the suicide and the CV, cardiovascular stuff and all that, and we're starting to get a groundswell movement. But you look at smoking, and while it has made some great leaps and bounds, there's still a ton of people in the fire service and the world that are just smoking, and it makes you think like, well, how do you make a difference there? And all you can do is sort of sometimes you have to create rules that, you know, if they don't follow them, they don't have a job.
We actually get them before we hire them. When we offer them a conditional letter of employment, they sign off on our tobacco use. So we have nothing for the current membership of the department, but every firefighter that comes into the department, probably for the last 6 years, hey, you want to work here, you have to, you know, no tobacco use for your career. And they, of course, they sign on the dotted line. They want the job, you know. So maybe 20% of our department now falls under the no tobacco use clause. So through time, it will be 100%. But that takes time.
Yeah.
They can't. It's very hard for departments to come to me. You know, I got 22 years on the career department. Say you can't smoke, you can't chew. Well, okay, good, because I don't smoke or chew, nor have I ever. So it's easy.
Right.
But we have members on our department that have smoked for 20 years, 25 years. They've been members of the party. It's very, very hard to do.
Sure. Well, look at respiratory protection plans and mandatory mask rules. Why are they in place? You have a mandatory mask rule because people are not smart enough, you know, or don't have the common sense enough to wear the mask when they're supposed to. So you have a mandatory mask rule, but then what happens? The department isn't, the department isn't enforcing it. People aren't enforcing a mandatory mask rule, you know? So again, it has to fall at the top of the department. The bottom of the department will look exactly like the top of the department, you know? The firefighters look like the captain looks like the battalion looks like the division, the platoon looks like the platoon commander. Everybody winds up looking like the platoon commander. So if he's not enforcing rules and regulations and people are getting hurt and, you know, that kind of thing, well, you know, it's his fault. All of this, you know, I mean, there's personal responsibility, but you know what? Supervision, this is something we just put in a poster for full contact leadership. You can't supervise by choice. If you're a supervisor, you have no choice but to supervise. You can't lead by choice, because if you're a leader, you have no choice but to lead. And you can't command by choice, because if you're a commander, you have no choice but to command. So if you follow those three little mantra rules, you know, you should be, you know, taking care of the business of the department.
Yeah, I'm just looking for a quote here that I just saw the other day, and I reposted it by the U.S. Fire Administrator Keith Bryant, sorry. He put, and this was at the Cancer Symposium, so if you permit it, you promote it.
Exactly. What you permit, you promote. That came from Mike Vessling. I saw him teach in Oregon, and that was one of his slides. And I used that like 4 or 5 times in my classes after I should. What you permit, you promote. You know, and you know, and that leads into everything, including complacency and everything else. You know, here's a question, because I know we don't have that much time left. Where do you go with the suicide thing? You know, like what's the answer to that one? You know, other than peer counseling and things along those lines. Sometimes you never see those things coming.
Yeah, you don't see those coming. You know, in this October will be 2 years that I lost one of my mentors in the fire service to suicide, which was absolutely related to the job. He was a incident commander of a line of duty death that he shouldered all the responsibility for, unfairly shouldered all the responsibility, but he was that guy. He's a firefighter, came up to the ranks, and a volunteer firefighter died on his fire, and he shouldered all that for many years. You know, so you could sometimes see the person change, but don't see the end result of the suicide. And I commend that department. It's Branford, Connecticut. It's the neighboring department. He was a current deputy chief, so shift commander. And I commend that department on how they've handled it. The membership has this grassroots effort of peer support. So now they started this peer support team, not just for their department, for the entire state. And we meet regularly. We raised funds. We brought the group in from Indianapolis that trained us all how to be peer support, train the trainers. And you know what, Chief, you've done peer support thousands of times. Every firefighter in this country has done peer support, because when you go back to the firehouse and you sit around the kitchen table and you have a cup of coffee, talk about that call, and you listen to somebody, that's doing peer support. But we have to educate the firefighters. All of us need the education to understand, well, when is it normal? And when is it start to push that limit of this is outside of the norm, normal? You know, calls will impact all of us. There's no way around it.
Yeah, there is no way.
It'll impact each of us a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and we can't be afraid. For many years, I've talked to firefighters, and I'm like, man, this doesn't sound good. I hope he doesn't go home and do anything stupid. Now, I've called out people I know and say, are you considering suicide? Do you want to kill yourself? And the first time I said it, Chief, it was very, very hard to get those words out.
Yeah.
But I thought of Ronnie Mullen. I thought of Chief Mullen. And I thought of his son and his family. And I says, you know what? All that I needed was to be a little more courageous, to be a courageous leader and ask that hard question.
Yeah.
I found that asking the question now is the easy part. It's what you get out of the other end. Because now, if you have a firefighter, someone you know, say, I have thought about suicide. Whoa, now what do you do?
Yeah, what do you do now?
So we're all, and I was afraid to ask that question. I have since asked that question, I think 3 times now. And each time, one time I got no, Chief, I don't think so, but I'm scared. Okay, man, we're going to get you some help. And it worked, and the system worked, and we're able to get that members some help.
Well,
and I think
I'm sorry.
It comes to us to be courageous and not be afraid to ask those questions and to call people out and say, hey, I don't like the way you're acting. Are you okay? And what are you going to get? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. No, I don't think you're okay. Let's get you some help.
You see that a lot. We had 2 suicides in this area in Monmouth County. One actually right at the fire academy. Guy came to the fire academy and jumped off the tower during the day, like with no classes going on. Another one in another department, a career guy. One of my very best friends was a volunteer firefighter for a long time. He wasn't a volunteer anymore, but he committed suicide a few years ago. You look at that. And one of the things when we were talking in the wellness program in the Fire One was, how many of you here know how to contact your department's EAP program or how to get help for something through that program? And like no one knew. No one even knew if they existed. And I imagine through the city, they probably have to have that through their insurance or something along those lines, but nobody knew. No one was told by the department. So one of the things we told them was go find out. Find out who, if you had some kind of problem in life, whether it be, a psychological problem, a family problem, who would your department, direct you to talk to, because I think that could be one of the things too. And again, that's another thing that's moving in a good direction is people don't know where to get the help. They really don't. And there are departments that have their heads buried in the sand, and so they don't tell their people these things.
Yeah, what I've done here has worked, and the majority of the guys are like, Chief, really again, But I bring our EAP provider in every single year, and I could probably tell you what he's going to say for his 20-30 minute spiel. He comes up, and I get him in front of every shift every year, and I get him in the face of everybody so they know who he is and who the business is and what they need to do to contact him. So I push it on him. And you know what? During hours, that's my right, and I don't push too much on them, but I push that stuff because it's important. So I challenge instructors, company officers, training divisions to bring in your EAP providers. They're always looking for an audience, and what you'll probably find is your town or city is paying that EAP provider, whether you use them or not. Don't use them. So you know what? Get some of your city's money out of them and have them come in and do a presentation for your membership. But also, I caution departments with just EAP, because EAP is great. They do a lot of good things, and they've saved a lot of our members. But I'm also a big advocate of peer support, because I think there's a lot of the stuff at the EAP level is the physician level. A lot of the stuff that we deal with and a lot of the things that we need to talk about don't need to be at the physician level. But we need to have that peer support network within every firehouse, so we know when to bump it up to the AP, and also just to be the eyes and ears in the firehouses to know we need to bump this up to the AP, we need to bump this up to the peer support because this brother or sister really needs some help.
Well, I know the police have cop to cop, which is, I guess, the peer support. What does the fire service have in place? Because I know there are people that don't know.
We call peer support. So the IFF has a training program. The Illinois Fire Department has a wonderful training program that they come out, and they'll come out to your department and train your members to be peer supporters, and also peer support train the trainers. Chief, what it comes down to is listening and not being afraid to ask a question, and making sure that you have eyes and ears in the firehouse to say, you know what, PJ is not acting right today, and you know what, 3 weeks ago he did a pretty shitty call. Let's make sure he's okay, and not accept, oh yeah, I'm good, because we all know that that's the canned firefighter answer. I'm good. Yeah. So the peer support, the peer-to-peer, the peer support programs teach us how to be good, active listeners, and to identify a brother or sister who just needs to share a couple cups of coffee, or
that's great.
That brother or sister who needs to speak to a physician, or that next level.
Actually, you know what? I once you mentioned the IFF, then I understand what you're talking about, peer-to-peer. We actually, if anyone doesn't know what this is, on the Monmouth County Fire Academy website, we have a section that says Health and Wellness for Firefighters, and on there we have all the links to Firefighter Cancer Network, the IFF peer-to-peer. That's actually there. That's one of the ones I didn't put on there. There's the cardiovascular. There's a whole bunch of stuff on it. There's about 9 different links to firefighter support mechanisms on the Monmouth County Fire Academy website. So if you don't know where to go look for them, then I just gave you a resource to go look at, because we put that in there just recently, and again, because we've seen this around the county a couple of times, not only police, fire, but police as well, and EMS.
Yep. And I'm going to throw out another resource for the Facebook page that this peer team started. It's called the Connecticut, so CT Firefighters Peer Support Network. So CT Firefighters Peer Support Network on Facebook. And for a very small, groundbreaking organization, they've really been doing some great things. And we actually have a few success stories with substance abuse issues also, where the IFF has a new facility that's open specific to firefighters for a counseling center. And we had a gentleman in the Connecticut Fire Service who needed some help, wanted to go to that, but insurance-wise, that, red tape, and it's a network, right? One firefighter called another firefighter, somebody from the peer support. The gentleman who's running the peer support called somebody down in another state. I got the guy, contacted the IFF peer support. Boom! The Connecticut brother was was on his way to the new IFF support facility, getting the help that he needs.
Where is that? Do you have any idea?
I forget the city that's in offhand. But what I'll do is after the show, I'll put some of these resources up. I'll send them over to you. We can.
Yeah, you look at some of these places that have these great support facilities and these mechanisms in place, like New Jersey, the FMBA, which is the Firemen's Mutual Benefit. It's a state union. They have a ton of support mechanisms as well. But you're right, the IFF, they're such a huge organization, and they have such great people doing such great things across the country, that they have excellent resources in place for these things. And it just shows you don't have to reinvent the wheel. All you'd have to do is go and find out from someone that has been there before.
So Maryland, Upper Marlboro, Maryland is where the new IAFF facility is, treatment facility. Okay. So we're a few minutes over, which I'm not surprised, even though it's only the two of us. I can
went fast.
Talk for hours and hours and hours, especially stuff like this. There was 2 comments made on Twitter. One is from a good friend of mine, and I know you're friends with him as well. That's our friend Sonny O'Connor. He talked earlier about he doesn't want to be the example, but he could be the example for cardiovascular health. And unfortunately we're kind of running out of time. But Sonny O'Connor is a very young man. He's a firefighter in Nebraska. He's a good friend of ours. And he had a significant cardiac event that gave him that wake-up call to realize that, he may not be there for his family if he doesn't, change the way he's living and doing things. And he's posting all the time, he's at CrossFit.
He's made some great advances, man.
Yeah,
we're proud of you.
He needed that wake-up call, and I'm extremely proud of him. I consider him, even though he's a Red Sox fan.
I was just going to say that.
You know what I mean? I'm waiting. The phone's gonna blow up now because I know.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's his only floor. He's a Red Sox fan.
Yeah. There's one other comment here. It says, chiefs and station officers have to encourage their personnel to manage their physical and mental health. I agree. But like we mentioned, like Chief Villo, you mentioned, that has to start from the top down. There's many things that could start from the bottom and work their way up in our organizations, but we need that leadership up top. So if you're a chief officer and you're listening today, take those bugles and put them to work on many, many fronts. There's many things that your ground troops and your departments need, and one of them is the leadership in mental health, cardiovascular health, and cancer prevention. The chiefs of the fire service need to start instilling that personal accountability and those policies and procedures, and make us accountable for those practices, and we'll start making those changes. So Chief Avila, I really appreciate you on here. We'll have to get you up.
No problem, brother. It was great.
When your illegitimate son Frank Ricci could actually join us. Would you have any last words for us before we thank our sponsor again?
No, listen, I'd like to thank Fire Engineering for having me on here. They've been a great supporter of me through the years, and through the books and everything. And like to thank Shannon and all the people behind this show, and of course thank you. You guys, the Connecticut Connection, are real solid bunch of guys, and the fire service is very lucky to have you guys.
Well, thank you, Chief. And as a last note, Chief Avila mentions the Connecticut Connection. I was lucky enough to meet him through Frank Ricci when we did the Tactical Perspectives DVD series. And one of the key contributors to that series was Chris Pepler. Chris Pepler is the deputy chief in Torrington, Connecticut, who's been fighting really, really hard over the last couple of years with cancer. Started as mouth or oral cancer, has never smoked a day in his life, has never chewed tobacco a day in his life. And he's still fighting. He's still having some struggles. He was back in the hospital this week. Rumor had it that he was headed home yesterday, so that's good news. So I doubt he's watching, but maybe he'll watch this later on and know that we're thinking about him.
Love you, Pep.
Keep fighting. We all love you. And if you're watching the show today, we just ask you. I don't care what religion you are or who you pray to or who you wish good things to, but whoever you do that for, just say some prayers for Chris Pepler, Deputy Chief of Torrington, Connecticut, as well as all of our brothers and sisters who are fighting some of the demons of PTSD, having some cardiovascular health issues, maybe fighting cancer. They may be sitting in a facility right now getting their treatment. So we thank all of you for fighting and not throwing in the towel, and hopefully we'll get on board and we'll make a change in the fire service. So thank you to Fire Engineering, Chief Halton. Thank you to Kata Fabric for sponsoring this show. We appreciate you for watching today, whether you're watching live or you're watching the archive version. So our next show, the 4th Wednesday of October, Frank Ricci will be back, and we will pull another great topic, and we look forward to hearing from you with the hashtag FE Talk. So, Chief, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, PJ. Love you, brother.
Love you too, Chief. And thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.
You got it.